question that
No, that's right.
thank you for your interesting presentation. And you talk about the reasons, which include the individual preference and their lifestyle, and also the role of the capital. But how about the government? I mean the state, the role of the state in the process. Yeah.
That's one thing I think the argument is weak on, because it's really from the US perspective. And I think elsewhere, I think gentrification is often driven in other parts of the world. It's not state-led, or state public-private partnerships. So my argument, my presentation doesn't say much about that, because it's really a particularly US perspective, which I think is where the state has been relatively weak. There's really no federal government involvement in these things. Really, it's federal government. There's no central state. Isn't a term that's useful for the US. And even the municipal governments are relatively weak. We'd have to get up to the level of New York before we have anyone that has any kind of weight. And I think that's where, obviously kind of government plays a huge role in other countries and other places. And that I didn't discuss that in my talk. So that's clearly something I think it's a lacuna in my talk and my narrative. So thanks for pointing that out. The role of government, the role of the state. In the US, it's generally considered as like part of public-private. But the autonomous role of the state or government is not a big thing for the US perspective. And I think, so my presentation reflects.
Maybe you first, because you continue.
Well, I was going to say some of these products. I'm going to go off. I'm thinking about Japan here. I'm thinking about sex, actually.
That's good. Why wouldn't you?
Well, it was partly exactly. I was thinking about. I mean, you were about living alone.
It's a bit typical if you said it. You just can't.
It's going to be fine. I'm thinking about not having sex, actually, in terms of living alone. I mean, you and I were at a conference not so long ago on living alone in Asia. I mean, it's a big issue out here. But one of the things about that I'm interested in is, and it's to do with. I mean, we didn't talk too much about. It was about poverty and rich and poor, but it was a bit kind of demographic and lifestyle. And I was thinking about, like these young people who can't move to the city because they can't afford it. Now, I mean, there's an equally important phenomenon about people living at home. They can't get out of the suburban home, which is an interesting thing where you get, if you like, the poor family who are trapped in suburbia, but their children can't join the friends because they haven't got a job, they have an income. So that's equally important phenomenon thing. And of course, because they can't leave home, especially in Asian culture, they can't get married, you can't have kids, and so on and so forth. So there's all these kind of interactions going on that certainly in Japan they contribute quite significantly to the fertility rate being so low, to do with where people are living. Just other comment was to do with suburbia. Whenever I go back to the UK and travel around, so I'm struck by the decline of the small town. Suburbia, in a broader sense, it's these towns that used to be commuter belt, they were attractive places to live. People like living in the countryside, urbs and rurally. I mean, they're relatively high crime rates, lots of people hanging around doing nothing, disenfranchised youth. I mean, it's the decline of the small town as well as suburban decline, I think, we're seeing, certainly in somewhere like the UK. So that was one other thing. One of the things about Hong Kong, lots of public housing, which it links to, again, it's partly linked to the comments you made about Amsterdam, where do people live. But there's a debate now about, I think there is, about who's the public housing for, because there's a huge waiting list of young people who can't afford to live anywhere. But public housing is very much for families. So I think that's part of that kind of shifting kind of debate about, the different demands from different people and who wants to live in the city.
Just not answering in the sense of just moving on from them. One is just about the differential nature of people being able to move to the cities. So one of the studies showed a relatively high proportion of suicide amongst white low-income males in small town and rural America. And you looked into it in a bit more detail, and a high proportion of young gay guys who couldn't get to the big city. And if you get to the big city, you can find a gay community, whatever. You're stuck in Omaha, Nebraska, or some small town. you're gay, you have a really hard time. You can't kind of get out from that. And so they were saying that, you know, that I think that shows in a dramatic fashion the kind of cost if you can't get to the city, and you're different from small town, high school, rah-rah, macho American culture, and you're a gay guy in the closet. So I think that's interesting, and I think the more extreme case of how much you would give the cost for those who can't make the move. And you're right, I mean, there's a differential system. That's why I said about the Phoebe lived in 1,500 square foot, and no one can live like that who works in the equivalent of Starbucks. So yeah, it's definitely a kind of differential income thing. And obviously, like a more nuanced argument I'll build up on that. And the other one I think was about Japan. You mentioned kind of Japan, and I think there's a sense of, I'm thinking of the cost. I mean, the higher proportion of shut-ins in Japan, unbelievably high than almost anywhere else. And I think that's kind of connected to sort of like rising levels of depression amongst people who can't make into adulthood. And one of the things is, actually they say the same thing about what's happening in the Middle East. There's actually the Middle East and places like, there's not, you're moving from childhood to adulthood, you're actually in waitinghood. Because if you can't get a job, you can't get a house, you can't, no motorbike, no girlfriend, is a thing in Vietnam, right? And so you're having this, like, for many groups, a kind of transitional experience, which for 50 years ago, there was more of a sharper break, you got a job or whatever. And when you have like that penumbra of childhood and adulthood, that you're living at home and whatever, and I think that's, we easily say Arab Spring was caused by everyone in waiting, but I don't think it's quite true, but there's clearly something going on there about that sort of, sort of liminal space that you can't express life cycle changes in employment or a different housing state or independent housing status. And so one of the things in the US was the increasing proportion of people who were returning to live with their parents during the recession. Which actually was becoming like more like an extended family. That was always a criticism of the models of life cycle changes. I remember being criticised for that. Well, you leave home, you get a job, you start your own family. No, we don't do that. We go and live with our parents. So
the booming for Asia, it's important to gender it a bit more. It's not only class that people in Asia or in Japan don't have money to move to a city, but it's very specifically women that if they stay within traditional role patterns and marry, have to move to places where they don't want to live. So in Japan, you have to move to the suburbs because your husband still wants to do it, and then you get children, and you're stuck in the suburbs. So all these young professional women, they're more interested in Western men than Japanese men, because Japanese men is a tradition. Well, you see the same thing happening in China at the moment, where there's a lot of single women staying specifically in cities alone because they don't want to get into these traditional patterns.
The one consequence is, I did see once they said like, it's probably changing now, but a third of all high fashion in Europe ends up young women in Japan. Because if they're not getting married and they're living on their own, they have a higher disposable income and they're spending that in high fashion.
Or if they're still living at home as well.
Sure. So you can tell Japanese women anywhere in the world by the quality of their clothes.
It's blame one of the problems with the Japanese economy, spending all their money on these imported clothes rather than things that are made in Japan. Right. So that was. I'm going to go. I'll pass you over to you, but I'm conscious that there's time. But that was great, John. And
we'll be in touch.
Be in touch.
It's just, your people will skip to my people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Enjoy your next cruise.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
You need someone to pick up the trash. And so you have this thing, but when you look at where those people are living, they're living miles away in the US system. So the guys making the gaming and so forth, they're all like living close by. And the black lady, unskilled, who's doing the cleaning of the offices, she lives 15 miles away with a 1 hour commute. I discovered this, actually, I spoke to hotel maids in Australia, in Sydney hotels, and a large portion of them were from India. All of them lived in the western suburbs, which was an hour and a half by public transport to come in. And so the poor are almost like doubly punished now because of low wages, plus they've got the thing about the time. So I remember one woman in particular struck me because she, 5:35 to come in to start at 7, worked till 2 o'clock, then went back, and then went to kind of night school to get up. And so one of the things is you have the issue of poverty now. It used to be where people couldn't eat or they're starving. I don't think that's quite the case. Obviously, some people are starving, but it's the incursions on their time. And their time in the sense of like there's less time for recreation, less whatever. And one of the things they do, these cognitive studies of being poor is the equivalent of being under extreme stress all the time. And one of the things is I think that's partly about time. And not all about time, but a lot about time. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that I could. Thank you very much.